Friends, in this episode of Popular Awareness series, we will be talking about the very vexed, complicated issue of Kashmir. As you all know, in Kashmir from last few months, the internet was down and the major democratically elected leaders like Mehbooba Mufti, Farooq Abdullah, Omar Abdullah, they have been interned and severe charges have been labeled against them, charges so serious that even they need not be produced to the court for 2 years and they can remain in the jail for 2 years. Few months ago, before that, government decided that Kashmir, which is a state, which had a status of the state, Jammu and Kashmir, its status was reduced to that of a union territory. It was split into two parts, Ladakh on one side and Jammu and Kashmir on the other. And Jammu and Kashmir is to have elected representative assembly, while Ladakh will not have any such thing. And both will be ruled by the center through lieutenant governors. So this was a major debacle for the struggle which was going on in Kashmir. And in this episode, we'll try to see a bit of a history of Kashmir as to how we have come to this pass and how many people who have constantly been saying the issue of Kashmiri Pandits, how are they related to any of the communal issue, that let's try to see. Now I must tell you that when India became independent, there were many princely states. Now these princely states were not directly administered by the British. British had overall control, but these were the local kings were ruling that. And at the time of independence, it was told to these rulers that you have three options. Option 1, merge with India. Option 2, merge with Pakistan. Option 3, remain independent. Now most of the princely states, they merged with India. Some of them, very few, merged with Pakistan. And the problem remained of two major princely states. One was Nizam Hyderabad, which was ruled by Nizam, which was a very large state. And Nizam wanted to remain independent or else merge with Pakistan, because Jinnah Sahib had offered him all the facilities and that his powers will not be reduced. Now here in Hyderabad, Indian government sent army which was called police action, and Hyderabad was forcibly merged into India. Nizam was a Muslim, but the majority of people were Hindus. Now Kashmir had totally different case. Kashmir's Raja Hari Singh was a Hindu and the majority people there were Muslims. And Hari Singh again also wanted to remain independent. But in Kashmir's case, Jinnah of Pakistan, he felt that Kashmir should merge with Pakistan. And from Pakistan side, what is called Kabaili, the tribal type people, they attacked Kashmir. They were totally backed by the Pakistani army. Now when they attacked Kashmir, the king of Kashmir, Hari Singh, felt helpless. He went to Jammu for his security reasons, leaving the administration to his representative, and Sheikh Abdullah, who was leader of National Conference, also became an important person in taking the decision about the future destiny of Kashmir. Now these people from Kashmir, they landed up in Delhi, and in Delhi they requested Indian government to send army to fight the Pakistani aggression. Now Indian government at that time had a dilemma. Dilemma was that at that time Kashmir was not a part of India. Kashmir was an independent state. Now in this independent state, how can India send its army was a question. And this was deliberated, and this was primarily handled by Jawaharlal Nehru. What was the reason? People accuse that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel handled so many cases of princely states and no problem occurred. Nehru handled only Kashmir and he left with a lot of problem. Now this is a total wrong way of looking at the issue. Nehru had to handle Kashmir only because Nehru at that time was the foreign minister, and Kashmir was not falling totally in the territory of India. Kashmir had a boundary with Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, very close to Russia, etc., etc. Strategically, it was a very important state, a very important part of India. And in this situation, then an agreement was struck between the representative of Maharaja Hari Singh in presence of Sheikh Abdullah, who was the undisputed leader of the people of Kashmir, and the Indian government led by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. What is the agreement? That Kashmir will not merge in India, but it will accede with India. What is the difference? In accession, Kashmir will remain autonomous in most of the issues except defense, communication, currency and external affairs. So this was supposed to be dealt by Delhi government, and other things were left to the Kashmir Assembly. It was also decided that Kashmir will have separate constitution, Kashmir will have separate flag, Kashmir will have Sadr-e-Riyasat and a prime minister. On these grounds, Indian army went there, and Indian army quelled the aggression of this Pakistani supported tribal, and 2/3 part of Kashmir came to India, 1/3 remained with Pakistan. Now at that time, ceasefire was declared, and many people blame Nehru for the ceasefire. The advice of ceasefire came from Governor General Mountbatten, and the main reason was that if the war was extended, it would have killed many of the civilians. The suggestion was that Nehru was prevailed upon that the matter should be taken to United Nations, because United Nations that time was a great international arbitrator. It was not like today. United Nations had lot of powers, and it was thought that United Nations will solve the issue. Now with this agreement, ceasefire was declared, matter was taken to United Nations, and United Nations opined that plebiscite should take place in Kashmir, referendum should take place in Kashmir, and people of Kashmir should be given the option whether number A, they want to remain independent, number 2, they want to merge with India, number 3, whether they want to merge with Pakistan. These options were to be given. Now the condition of this referendum was that Pakistan will withdraw its aggression and India will reduce its army presence, and under UN supervision the referendum will take place. Somehow, because of America's backing of Pakistan refused to vacate the aggression, and referendum never took place. Meanwhile, when Kashmir was acceded to India, Sheikh Abdullah at that time, who was the leader of National Conference, had declared that he had opted for India because in India he sees secular values. In Gandhi and Nehru, he saw two great stars of secular values. But later on, he observed that Gandhi was murdered and Nehru was surrounded by pressure from the communal forces who wanted to forcibly merge Kashmir to India. Now in this situation, Sheikh Abdullah felt very shaken. He started having a dialogue with America, China, Pakistan. He was declared as anti-national and put into prison for 17 long years. Now this was a turning point. That time, of course, already elections had taken place in Kashmir. Sheikh Abdullah had been elected as Prime Minister, and he had also implemented the land reforms. He had also he was inspired by the Russian Revolution, and he had named Lal Chowk as the central place of Srinagar, the capital of Jammu and Kashmir. Now with this Sheikh Abdullah's imprisonment, the whole problem begins, and a feeling of alienation set in the people. Meanwhile, under pressure from the communal forces, India started reducing the powers of autonomy of the Kashmir Assembly. Same time, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, who later on became the president of Bharatiya Janasangh, he started insisting that Kashmir should be forcibly merged into India right away. Now, because of this, people of Kashmir, especially young people, started feeling alienation, separateness from India, and some sort of a militancy started coming in to oppose the Indian policies. At this point of time, Pakistan helped them, and later on, of course, in 1980s. This we will deal in the later lecture as to how America had propped up Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda had joined anti-Soviet forces, and the Soviet forces were defeated, and Al-Qaeda, after that, many of the Al-Qaeda entered Kashmir, and Al-Qaeda element communalized the Kashmir issue. As such, Kashmiriyat is not Islam. Kashmiriyat is a synthesis of Vedantic tradition, Buddhist values, and Sufi values. So this is what Kashmiriyat stands for. There was a thick interaction of Hindus and Muslims. But under the pressure of Al-Qaeda, many Hindus started being targeted, and during this period, Government of India started sending more and more army into Kashmir. I must tell you today, in Kashmir, for every 6 Kashmiris, there is 1 army personnel. We recall that army is generally meant to fight the enemies. Here in Kashmir, the army presence is there from decades and decades, making the civic life very difficult, making the civic life under heavy intimidation. Now in 1980s, Maqbul Butt was hanged for this militant terrorist activities, and after that there was a great amount of dissatisfaction in Kashmir. At the same time, Kashmiri Pandits started feeling a lot of threat. Kashmiri Pandits started feeling a lot of threat. Many of them were killed, and from some of the mosques, very insulting slogans to Kashmiri Pandits started being given by the fanatic elements of who had come from abroad, who had been part of Al-Qaeda, or who were totally into the communal ideology. Now because of this, Kashmiri Pandits felt very threatened, and the government that time was headed by a governor who later on became leader of BJP party. Governor Jagmohan, instead of controlling the militancy and reassuring the Pandits to stay on in Kashmir, that state will protect them, instead of that, he made arrangements to vacate Kashmir by Pandits. So around 3.5 lakh Kashmiris they vacated with the facilities given by the state government. Now this was very strange, that a government which is supposed to see that the people are protected is here helping them to leave their own home and hearth. Of course, Kashmiri Pandits faced a lot of problem. Like many of the victims of communal violence all over the India, Kashmiri Pandits also had to face a lot of problems. Now after 1990, then gradually different governments came, but democracy started getting weakened, and one after the other, as militancy started growing, the presence of army in Kashmir went up. People, especially the young people, out of dissatisfaction, they constructed the culture of stone throwing. Young boys, girls, they started showing their protest by throwing stones, and since last 5-6 years, the government has started doing the pellet gun firing. In pellet gun firing, nearly 1,000 young men, their eyesights have been affected, some of them have been killed, and some of them suffered severe injuries to their body because of the pellet wounds. Now this is on one side, that where we regard Kashmir as a part of India, but the civic rights, civic liberties were totally denied to the people of Kashmir. What is the solution to Kashmir? For this, the Congress government had appointed an interlocutors committee. Interlocutors committee had eminent people like Dilip Padgaonkar, Radha Kumar, and M.M. Ansari. This committee gave the report that autonomy should be restored in Kashmir. More people should be given, Kashmiri Assembly should be given more powers, and the democratic process should be made stronger and stronger. Contrary to that, the policies went on where democratic liberties, civil liberties have been totally withdrawn, and last few months their liberties are totally under damage, under danger. Different envoys of European Union countries have been coming and trying to see the condition in Kashmir, but Indian elected representatives are not being permitted to go to Kashmir. So the point is very clear that Kashmir is under a heavy rule where the civic liberties have been totally suspended. What should be the future of Kashmir? Number one, its statehood needs to be restored. Number two, the dialogue between the different dissident elements in Kashmir and the government of India needs to be brought forward. Number three, dialogue with Pakistan on the issue of Kashmir needs to be brought in. It is only through dialogue, number one. Number two, through strengthening democracy and through winning over the people of Kashmir that we can solve the problem of Kashmir in the long term. Kashmir, as per the Treaty of Accession, is a part of India, and similar clauses, of course, now the argument was given, Kashmir is not able to progress because Article 370 is there. But similar provisions are there in many other states also, and as such this is a lie that Kashmir has not been able to develop. I must inform you that the social indices of Kashmir related to infant mortality rate, related to health of pregnant women, related to education, related to other health parameters, Kashmir stands much higher than many of the states in India. And the reason for that is, of course, the land reforms which were brought in by Sheikh Abdullah when he became the Prime Minister. So today, under some or the other pretext, the Hindutva agenda where they wanted to abolish Article 370, they have done it, and after that also the peace in Kashmir is nowhere in sight. If civic life is not there, the peace cannot come. So restoration of civic life is very important, and restoring Kashmir's status as the autonomous state needs to be strengthened so that we can have a peaceful time and better development in times to come. Thank you very much.